I'm probably going to make 3 videos on the V2 playtest. One about the British armored vehicles, which is this one here, and how I think they'll affect the meta. Another one on some other infantry changes or the meta changes to spawning, and then another one on the helicopter flight model. And I'm really not going to focus on showcasing anything. I'm sure you've already seen the content. Everybody's put a video out by now. I just want to talk about how things are going to affect the game, in my opinion. I'm also going to do this live in one take because I was having issues making this video, so I just called up my clan member, Butt Fiasco, and we talked about things. Alright, so I've been trying to make a video about the change of sprits for a little bit now, and I've recorded it like 3 times and scrapped it all, and now my voice is hoarse and I'm annoyed. So I called you, because if I call you, I can only do one take, and then I just have to do whatever I say. It just has to go in. It has to be edited. And I have no choice. I can't restart, right? Because we're having a good discussion. It's live.
Alright, sure.
There's a few things I want to talk about, right? Elkin, what do you think?
Reticle is a little bit big, but otherwise not bad. A little tubular.
It's kind of weird the way it blurs out until you focus.
Yeah, but it does that for me for most sites. Oh, so especially bad on this. I think it's just because of how thin it is.
Well, anyway, it's the first variable zoom, so I think that actually kind of has implications. I remember talking back in V11 when the Brits first came out, and they had the ACOG with the irons on top. People were talking about variable zooms and actually adding those as usable sites. And I remember there was a QA guy arguing with me on Reddit a bit about how they wanted to have 1x and 4x have different functionality, different advantages, different weaknesses, and be used together. Which I thought was kind of ridiculous because, well, I could show you why it's ridiculous. Because there's
squad
never
handles,
been, like,
squad handles their zoom mode are weird.
Yeah, modders have been getting around it for a while. Like, they've used the shift zoom to be the second zoom level, and some of them have 2 different weapon selections. But if you just look, like, you don't need 1x.
Yeah, 0.5.
Hipfire is ridiculous, and your impacts can immediately guide you. There's never been one situation in squad where I've had 4x and thought I need 1. Only reason I really mentioned that is because I want to see OWI shift away from that philosophy. I know the other reason why they've been using, like they haven't given a lot of conventionals 4x, is to balance them against unconventionals, because it used to always be on AAS that you'd be fighting unconventionals. Now it's mostly insurgency or invasion. So I'd love to see them go to like full project reality. Everybody gets a 4x, and I'm kind of hoping that this first introduction of variable zoom could be kind of a power creep towards that. That's my idea. But I'm probably just overlooking it, right? It's probably just, hey, we bought the Aussie mod, they had an Elkin, Brits are using that, check it out.
Most likely. I don't think OWI will go that far. But it is a nice added addition.
Yeah. I think it's better than the British ACOG by a little bit, just because the ACOG had that 200-meter bar, which was super annoying.
Yeah. The British ACOG is a
anyway,
little bit weak.
I'm going to get to the HAT kit, because I want to talk about the HAT kit in relation to VIX, but the biggest topic of this video is going to be new British VIX. Because currently, I think Britain is the weakest conventional when it comes to having armor in-game.
By far.
Like, US and Russia, top, easy. Good IFEs, ATGMs, good APCs between strikers and BTR 82s. They have light VIX, which are useful, super useful for like logistic purposes. I don't mean logistics as in logistics, I mean getting people around the place they need to be. If you have 3 lodges on a map and you have fucking 7 backcaps to cover because it's 3-lane RAS, these guys are your best friend, any kind of light vehicle. Same with getting engineers around the map. They have a ton of useful strategic purposes that don't necessarily play into the armor game, but play into the infantry game. And, well, they have those, US and Russia.
Yeah, the MRAP and the Tiger. Just all around very good vehicles.
And they have ATGM equivalents. ATGM's up top. which are just god tier Vics. Like, they are solid, they are well rounded, and all of their vehicles are kind of 1-to-1 in terms of classification and effectiveness. So they're balanced against each other pretty well. Then you have like Mech, who I think a lot
Has
of people
the
would
rocket
say,
scout car.
yeah, a lot of people would probably initially call them a weaker faction because they're more unconventional, but you have to think of it as their IFE. So their tanks, yeah, if you have T-62, that's pretty weak, but usually they'll get at least a T-72 to back it up. Their IFEs, yes, the BMP-1 is weaker than the 2 if it's using that, but they get the 2 on a lot of layers, and regardless, ATGM IFE is 17 layers above Warrior. Regardless of circumstance, you have any ATGM on any vehicle in this game, and it is going to dominate anything that has a cannon.
Unless they're really bad. That's the only caveat.
If it's two higher skill players, anyway, that's what I'm saying. If you're using them effectively, and then
I would make a point for the Crow's Bulldogs, but that's just a fancy warrior minus the big cannon. But I see your point.
the
Brit vehicles are really weak.
yeah, like Britain's equivalent to that right now, not with these new vehicles, is what they have Warriors, which are trash IFEs. They do not compete against BMPs, 2s or 1s. The best feature of the Bulldog is that you can bully things under you pretty well because of your armor. They could counter BTR 82s decently well, but even then, you get 4 guys who know what they're doing in BTR 82s, and they can kill every warrior on the map if the warriors aren't wolfpacking. Just because you can get up close, brawl with them, kill their turret from close range, and ultimately, the only counter you have against that is assuming that they aren't going to do it. Like, the biggest advantage of the warrior is that you can bully bad players effectively, but the moment good players come up against you, you're
dead before you see them.
Yeah, you just have issues. And then these things, like, no anti-armor capabilities, none. This guy, I know you guys have memed around with the Chad dog and you've killed a couple of things with it, but it is strictly reliant on enemy incompetence. You can get into a good position with this, hold down, and start firing into a BTR-82. And if that BTR-82 has 3 brain cells, he will find you and kill your gunner before he is fully destroyed. The only time you kill armor with this thing is when they don't have 3 brain cells. And then this, of course, can just track things or shoot out tires if you're lucky at 7.62.
Should have made it a 50 cal. If it was a 50 cal, better
They did.
vehicle than the Bulldog.
Initially, it had the 50, and everyone complained about it. I complained about it, but when I complained about it, my idea wasn't take it out. It was make it reasonable. Like, the Bulldog chassis shouldn't have more HP than a MTLB chassis. It's the same fucking thing. The only difference is you have this ERA. I really hate the idea that OWI has where they don't just give Vehicle A more armor than Vehicle B. They also think Vehicle A, for some reason, needs more HP as well. Like, armor and hit points should be independent of each other. Hit points should represent some level of survivability for the crew compartment, and that should not really be any fucking different than that. Maybe a minor difference. And yet this has, I think, 1,000, and this is double at 2,000. It's absolutely ridiculous. So when they threw a Crow's M2 on top, it was outrageous. But
Nerf the armor, balance the vehicle, but instead they went the opposite route.
Yeah, exactly. But the point of this video is, will these Vics make Britain competitive? And I want to discuss this in length because I have some discussion about autocannons versus ATGMs I want to get to. But I want to start with the things that have direct counters, right? Imagine you're playing as Russia versus Britain in a balanced as possible type scenario where you have the traditional large layer vehicle loadout. You have tank to tank, right? 1 tank or 2 tanks to 1 tank or 2 tanks. Obviously, balanced enough. T-72 versus Charlie. Now you have this thing, which I like because it's one of the few British vehicles now that fits a role. It's an IFE. Like, it's no wishy-washy back and forth. This thing, with its 40mm autocannon, will probably stand at least somewhat toe-to-toe with BMP-2. That is speculation, because ATGMs are so much better than autocannons in most circumstances. But with the rate of fire and the caliber of this thing, and what I've heard from people who have actually played it in the game, in the live servers, which I have not yet, I think that at the very least, even if this is technically still probably the worst IFE, it's good enough that you don't need to put 3 of them on a layer. You can just put this 1-to-1 with a BMP2 and accept that Britain has a slight IFE disadvantage, you know?
Yeah, at the least you'll trade with a BMP2 after you take a missile.
Like,
But
my thought process is that if you can kill something that doesn't see you, it's a good enough vehicle. And I think that this thing sneaking up on a BMP2 will kill it before it gets its ATGM to autocannon combo off. Probably. When it comes to actually heads up stuff, if this runs straight into a BMP2, I think the BMP2, if it has the ATGM loaded, will still win. But I don't know what that margin will be, and regardless, I don't really consider that to be the deciding factor on which one's better. I think that they're more or less equal if you play it smart, you win. Which is something that's challenging in squad because they have some ridiculous shit. All the times that we've run dual BTR-82s and snuck up behind a Bradley and still lost the engagement despite getting both vehicles putting rounds on target before the Bradley even knew we were there is absurd. But
quick question. This is the Warrior chassis, right?
Yes, it should be identical to the Warrior chassis in terms of armor and
does it
speed.
30 mil bounce off upper front plate? It does, doesn't it?
Previously, they gave the 30 mil APDS, which is something else I'll get to.
Oh, okay.
I haven't tested it, but a dev claimed something to the effect of Penn's frontal Western armor to 300, which is pretty generic, but
that is pretty strong.
Yeah, so that's something we'll get to. But then let's go to the opposite end of the spectrum, right? Because we have our 1 tank to 1 tank, 1 IFE to 1 IFE, light Vics. Now we have a standard light Vic. So we can match these 1-to-1 with Tigers, right? And we're balanced there.
Mm-hmm.
Some notes about this one is the crow's seat for the crows one is passenger, meaning that anyone coming head on who knows that has line of sight on the gunner, and so they can see when they take them out, rather than like an MRAP where you're spraying the back seats and hoping. Yeah. I don't remember which side he's on.
So back left on the MRAP. I know because I'm newish.
Yeah. We got to post that comment here. We got to get everyone in my comment section on board with that meme. Now this thing obviously has the unconventional setup. I never use any real open top, whether it's HMG or MMG, in actual combat roles. They're pretty much strictly utility shit for me. So the idea of this doesn't really appeal to me or worry me. I think it's probably less practical than just the one swiveling turret. There's never going to be a situation where you're engaging from 2 sides like that and your gunners are still alive. But
you never know.
I think the biggest thing that will actually come out of this is it'll be a disadvantage, because when you're in a situation where you're running head on into a logi. Oh, this is nice. When you're running head on to a logi. Oh no, you can't swivel forward. Oh, can you swivel the second seat forward? Okay, I just pulled a 180 on this. This is going to be the best vehicle to run into a logi with.
OMGs, it's just like a helo.
Look at that
it's
art.
Just like a helo.
That's great. Okay, I changed my mind. I was going to say I wasn't going to like this because if you ran head on to something, you'd have issues, but never mind. It's also a 6-seater, so...
Carries half the squad.
Actually, is this? Yeah, 6-seater. So that's going to be better than MRAP, slightly worse than Tigers, but good all around. So that's a 1-to-1. So right now we have a 1-to-1 tank, 1-to-1 IFE that will probably compete, still pending, and 1-to-1 light Vic that will compete. The issue is, what the fuck is happening in the middle here?
You know, there's a lot of questions to be asked.
We already talked about these pointless anti-armor vehicles. I do not think in conventional v conventional that these have a place anymore. I think these should go the way of the BTR-80, and these should go the way of the what else? The MTLB for the Russian faction. in that it's something that gets relegated mostly to fighting irregulars on kind of thematic period correct maps. And when you have your traditional balanced large scale brass maps where you try to go 1-to-1, where you're rarely ever going to see a BTR 80 or a 30 mil MTLB or anything like that because they're too unusual, I think that is where we should be getting rid of Bulldogs now that we have Light Vics, because that's the one role they sort of covered. And I think either this needs the old Crows M2 and to be balanced to be competitive and similar to a striker with tracks, which is going to make it worse than a striker, but still at least competitive with a striker, or it just needs to be shunned out of conventional layers and put against unconventionals, because the only thing I can see happening right now is OWI considering this to be a counter to other Vics and putting it onto layers, and then us ending up with the British faction basically staying pointless.
Yeah. I mean, there's an argument to be made matching those up with the BTR 60s, the 14.5. There's an argument to be made, but it's not a very good argument.
Yeah, they're just different capabilities. Like, this is pointless. You can't fight infantry, you can't fight armor, if the armor has even half a brain. This you can fight infantry with. And it's even frustrating to infantry, because even if you track it, which effectively kills it, the amount of rockets you need to actually finish it off while it still becomes a mobile pillbox is pretty significant. So this, theoretically, as an anti-infantry thing, I guess there could be a world where we just consider that Britain has shit APCs and stack 2 of these against 2 BTR 82s, and then just deal with the fact that, hey, maybe this is a better anti-infantry weapon. But even then, I would take the 82s, because if you get engine, you can have your buddy push you out of harm's way, and you're less likely to get tracked, stranded, and destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then the question is, what is the APC? What is the British APC? Scimitar? They added this thing, and they said it was a Scoutvic comparable to a BRDM. Obviously, they can't balance that 1-to-1, but if they start considering this an additional vehicle class, and they don't consider this to be an APC equivalent, which it would be a pretty poor APC equivalent, because it can't carry infantry, which is kind of, the carrier part of C. But if they consider it to be an armored vehicle equivalent to the APC in terms of what it could do against other Vics, maybe you'd stand a chance, but then you're fucked on your infantry carrying capabilities, so that doesn't make sense. And then they're leaving this in the game. So this works as an APC, theoretically. It doesn't really work as an IFE. It gets trashed on. But now, I mean, we have 3 different vehicles that are potentially going to fill this middle role. And I think what they're going to end up doing, and what I've already seen on one layer, is throwing one of everything. And just kind of throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks, which then in turn doesn't just have the drawback of having potential balance issues and not really being 1-to-1 with an enemy team, and potentially being in a situation where, because of the random Vics they decided to throw in, you're at a disadvantage, or potentially even at an advantage depending on how they balance Russia against them. But that really wreaks havoc on squad composition.
Yeah.
How are you going to arrange a team?
So few squad members or infantry on the map if there's so many vehicles.
Not just that, but how do you arrange the Vic squads? With Russia, if you were going to go into a scrim and you wanted ideal comms without having too much squad bloat, it's pretty easy. I would throw the tanks in with the Spandrel. They all have the same goal of hunting down enemy armor. And that would give them the same comms, the same necessity, and give a 7-man or so, a 7 or 8-man, all into one squad, so you're reducing squad bloat. And then probably have another squad for the APCs, which could be working direct infantry opposite goals. And then I personally am a fan of having IFE separate as something that can support either group depending on the circumstances, but I know a lot of people would probably link IFE with APC. But with Britain, what the fuck do you do? Like, let's go to an actual layer real quick. The one I was looking at earlier was Kohat Ras 2. It was the first one I pulled up that I remembered as Britain versus Russia. So if you go to this layer, this is kind of what I'm talking about. Look at this. Like, there's no uniformity. And the Russian opposition is BTR 82, BMP, 2 scout cars. So looking at that, the counter, it's going to be IFE on IFE. So they're considering this to be equal to the BMP2, which it's not. Then it's going
No,
to be
not a range.
APC against APC, which you could make the argument that either the Bulldog is the APC or the Scimitar. Honestly, in terms of capability, I would rate the Scimitar closer to the BTR-82 since that can't even damage armor, right?
Yeah.
So now you have APCs
Scout.
that are actually kind of equal, but this one can't actually carry infantry. Or if you take it by the actual vehicle designation and consider the APC to be the thing that can carry infantry and support infantry, then you have one with absolutely no armor capabilities against one that can wreck armor. And then you have two scout cars. So the one scout car that's a match to this outclasses it because the gunner can't be killed and it can wipe out what's going on here, and it can still handle most infantry functions even with 3 people. And then the other scout car is left over to deal with one of these two, depending on which one you consider to be the equivalent. Which, if it's the Bulldog, the scout car could just kill the turret, run circles around it, and put 14-5 in the ass. Which I don't even know if that damages it, so it might just be a situation where neither can damage the other, which is pretty dumb. Or it's going to be going against this, and this will have the advantage on it by a pretty healthy margin. But I feel like the conclusion that I've drawn, because I've been thinking about this a lot, is this going to make Britain competitive? It is throw a dart and see what OWI threw on the layer, and go on a layer-by-layer basis. Because variety can hurt.
Very much, yes. There's no one doctrine for the armor design for Great Britain. It's kind of all over the place.
Another thing I've been thinking is, how would I counter it? Like, I wouldn't do this kind of thing at all. I would give Russia did I say counter? How would I design it if I was designing this layer? Because I would give Russia the standard, right? The one that's typical on most large-scale RAS, of 1 IFV, 2 APC. And then no tank because HAT. And then it would be pretty straightforward, right? BMP2 versus the new Warrior. And then for the 2 BTR-82s, I would have to choose 2 capable vehicles to counter them. Or I could even match it up, even if I was going to follow this philosophy of kind of going around and not really considering team structure and throwing a lot of different vehicle classifications. I think 1 Warrior plus 1 Scimitar is a reasonable counter to 2 BTR-82s. Although, I don't know, what do you think?
Because from what we've seen so far, the new Warrior just chops up most BTR class vehicles.
I'm talking about the
and
old
BMP.
Warrior.
Oh, the old Warrior. The old Warrior, yes. You could compare it to 30 mil easily. There wouldn't be any issue.
They have the same cannon. The cannon is effective against the BTR-82, and then the BTR-82s have arguably higher DPS cannons that are only going to be effective against the armor of one of those vehicles at long range. So, somewhat balanced. And then if you wanted to think ahead and think about team structure and think about servers with the Vic claim rules and how you don't want to create too many bloat squads, and if OWI had the same pet peeves that I do with bloat armor squads or with locked squads taking half of a vehicle type, or if they had the same hard-on for team organization like I do, where they were trying to make it easier for people to organize into scrims and support with similar vehicle types, just throw on 2 Scimitars, through 2 Warriors, and accept that this team will have a slight advantage in the name of organization.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think I'm one of the few people who gives as much of a shit about that in squad as I do.
Unfortunately, yeah, it doesn't align with OWI's design so far.
Or just the players in general.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think this is why I wanted to make this video first. I want to talk about other aspects of V2. I want to talk about the meta changes with the FOB design, as well as some gameplay changes. And then I want to go into the heli flight model and everything. But I really wanted to address this because I've been thinking about it a lot, because there's so much complication. There's so many variables here. Like, you add 2 different vehicles, but one's this entirely new vehicle type. We still don't have a dedicated APC, but now we have something that could technically work as an APC. I don't know. I think the answer really is just give the Bulldog the Crow system, and make it reasonable. And now,
Yeah.
boom, leave the weird bulldogs for unconventional layers. And shit, you could even give Britain an advantage because they do have the tracked APC, which is a big disadvantage against
Any
conventional
wheels.
APCs. And they have this IFE that's working with an autocannon, which is a disadvantage against ATGM IFEs. If they have those two disadvantages and you want to say, hey, you know what, fuck it, let's throw them a bone and let's actually consider a new vehicle class to be scout vehicle and give them a single scimitar to a Russian BRDM, even though that's quite a heavy imbalance. If they want to add on a new vehicle type and throw Britain an advantage in that department, that seems kind of reasonable. But I
Because
feel
Britain's
like,
already lacking in the infantry department. Much less so now because of the new hat kit and maybe because of the variable oil cannon. But I
yeah,
could see the point of Scorpion versus BDRM.
I don't know. I feel like Russia and Britain are both kind of short ends when it comes to small arms because they both have that low rate of fire. Britain at least gets the magnification, but I know a lot of people hate the L85 recoil pattern. Personally, I don't mind it. I don't know.
On par with the AK. I don't really see a difference.
The hat kit is a
Also,
good thing to mention though, because they are unanimously now getting hands down the best hat kit. So that
mhm.
is something they could do, and it has interesting implications. I might be doing some experimental shit. I might be running on this layer 3-man scimitar with hat in backup, and now you have ATGM equivalent kind of.
You strap two hat kits on the back of a Bulldog. There you go, BMP or Bradley.
Actually, fun fact that may be incorrect. If anybody knows, correct me in the comments. But I think that the reason why the warrior with the Milan is didn't get adopted into service is because the British believe in the general mechanized infantry idea of always having a ATGM in the form of a javelin dismounted from the Vic, doing that kind of thing. Which I was actually mentioning that when I was trying to record this video 17,000 times earlier, was that would have been my addition to the warrior. I just would have added the Milan on it, just like the one you see in War Thunder. It was tested, it was not adopted, but it's the same as adding something that's still hasn't been adopted now and isn't even in production as far as I know, which is the 40 mil. Because
Hmm.
that's going to upset a lot of people. There's a lot of people asking for modern Russian vehicles who there are probably legitimate reasons why they shouldn't have some of those modern Russian vehicles since Russia's already a pretty strong armor faction in a lot of ways, but they're asking for those things, and the answer from OWI is no, not in wide enough production, not in wide enough use. And then 40 mil warrior.
Mm.
That's gonna rub a lot of people the wrong way, I think. I'm okay with it, but there's gonna be a lot of angry people, I think, on Reddit.
I'm not gonna appreciate it, but if I can get a buff to Russia, that'd be appreciated following this.
There was one other thing I wanted to talk about. Two things specifically, kind of under the same category, and that is ATGMs versus cannons. I want to give a little bit of a brief history and an explanation of how big the disparity between those two things are. First of all, if I'm facing a T-72, I would rather be in a Bradley than an Abrams, because a Bradley can take 3 shots frontally from a T-72. Third shot will kill it. The engine block has a invisible wall behind it that will not allow rounds through, that will protect the ammo rack. So as long as you're frontally facing, you can 2-shot that T-72 with your ATGMs, and he is going to require 3 APFSDS shells to kill you. Now, if you're in an Abrams, they can glitch a shot through your turret ring, hit your turret and your hull, and deal 50% damage in a single shot twice over and kill you in 2 shots. The counter to this for the T-72, not a lot of people know this, so here's a heads up. The ATGM, which oftentimes isn't used for the T-72, will deal enough damage to 2-shot a Bradley. So if you can't hit the ammo rack because it's front on, it's a good ammo option. But besides that, not a lot of people know that. I would genuinely rather take a Bradley into a tank fight than a tank because of the disparity between ATGMs and shells. And that's at the tank level. At the tank level, tanks can eat 2, so it's not as big. Once you start getting to IFEs or APCs, it is ridiculous. You try to take a warrior against a BMP2 who's worth assault, unless you can get multiple shots from a concealed position on him before he even figures out where you're at, and then finish him off before he can launch, you're fucked. The best way to do that is with 2 or 3, which a lot of layers have prior to this update, so you can. But it should give you an idea. Previous versions of V11, we put how many rounds into the side or rear of a warrior? Not V11, sorry, I think it was V12. We took BTR-82s around the rear of warriors and dumped so much into them, and they were just able to turn around, bounce shots, and put shots into us. And this was before you could do full damage to the turret face, which actually means it was a V11, so my bad. Yeah. V11, when you could do a tiny amount of damage by hitting a turret face, but it wasn't full damage, and you do significantly more damage to the rear. Multiple times where we'd roll up with 2 ATGMs, and then not be able to kill something before it could get frontal immune to ATGM, multiple times we'd fire autocannons at the warrior, and it would rotate, be immune to our autocannons, and then slowly pick us off. Same against a Bradley. Any smart Bradley, even in the current version where you can deal full damage to their turret face, is going to ATGM one of you, switch to AP, kill the other. ATGMs have to either one-shot or come close to one-shot to feel even slightly immersive or realistic in this game. So OWI has balanced them to do so, whereas autocannons, they have taken way more liberties in what is realistic and have made them into marshmallow shooters to give the longest time to kill possible, starting all the way back in V9, V10 before ATGMs were even in the game. And now, because of these two wildly different mindsets and because of how weak autocannons are, the fact that they couldn't make ATGMs just as weak without massive uproars because, you know, you're shooting a one-shot, long reload weapon and not actually getting a kill, it just means that the disparity between the two is massive. And the 40mm Warrior is the first vehicle I can see and think might actually change that. It might actually stand a chance against ATGM slingers and be able to solo put enough rounds on target to kill something before it is a threat to you by locating you and ATGMing you. And I think that's what makes it very fascinating, and I think it is going to be interesting, because then when you start pairing that autocannon against other autocannons, it's going to wreck shop. It is going to be a BTR-82 demolisher. Yeah, like no APC or light Vic is going to be safe from this thing. It's actually going to showcase what autocannons should feel like in squad, but no other autocannon is going to. And so I think it's going to get the nerf hammer, honestly. I think the community is going to freak out about it, call it OP, and we're just going to end up with another castrated autocannon. That's kind of my prediction here. I would hope for the exact opposite. With V1, we saw the rocket pods on the mech vehicles, and those things are insanely fast to kill. And everybody, when that happened, started freaking out and saying, holy shit, this is so incredibly powerful, this is going to get nerfed, how is this in the game? And I had almost the exact opposite reaction of, please, 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 make other weapon system like this. You know, make this the standard for an autocannon too, like it should be. Rather than nerfing this back down and going to our World of Tanks damage model of, you know, thousands of hit points getting slowly chewed away by marshmallow shooters, let's actually have more weapon systems that can compete with this, because this matches ATGMs. ATGMs are already good. We now possibly have an autocannon in the game that can start to match these things. We have these rocket pods. Now we just need to learn to put HMGs and autocannons at an equally competitive state. And I think armor could actually be in a good place. But I think the exact opposite is going to happen. I think it's going to get nerfed.
Well, if it does get nerfed and they put on the Moan rocket launcher, hey, we're back to square one. Back to balance.
There we go. That was pretty much what I want to talk about the up-armored warrior, about the implications. But I think we're going to have V11 syndrome, where a new thing gets introduced, you know, ATGM emplacement, and nobody changes their ways. And they all just drive on top of hills, get killed by an ATGM, bitch on Reddit. drive on top of a hill, get killed by an ATGM, bitch on Reddit. Over and over and over until it gets nerfed. In V11, I think I lost one BTR to an ATGM for like the entire update, and we ran IFEs nonstop. And that was due to a really tricky play. And it wasn't because I'm like, ooh, I'm so good at the game, or I'm so smart. It's just because I didn't go on hills unless I scouted them on foot first. It was the most basic change of strategy. Get out of the Vic, go to the top, grab your binos, check ATGM locations, get back in the Vic, climb the hill. Don't stay so long that somebody can build an ATGM and hit you. A simple way to adapt to a new weapon system never affected me, just inconvenienced me. And yet, everybody else just did stupid shit, died, complained, and now we have a 1,500 meter limit on a weapon system that is, you know, designed to be an incredibly long range weapon. And it doesn't one-shot shit anymore. Now it just takes most vehicles to burning because, you know, that was apparently too challenging. I don't know. I'm a little bit bitter about it. I think I'm bitter because we're starting to see good improvements for infantry gameplay and good improvements for the meta and spawning and everything. And now I'm just starting to get a taste of like a good improvement for a vehicle, which I didn't think was possible. I gave up vehicles for dead. I gave it up for just a part of squad that was always going to feel unrealistic and shitty. And now I have a glimmer of hope, and now I'm just super nervous that it's going to be taken from me. And on that super depressing note, oh yeah, the heli carries 1,500 supplies and is pretty fast and handles like a Blackhawk, so it'll be good too. Don't want to neglect that.
I appreciate that. No, appreciate that a lot. Why in those Logi supply are midpoint drops.
And on that depressing note, is Britain going to be competitive in the vehicle game? HAT will be fantastic. VIX could potentially be really good depending on layer balance, but will most likely just be a confusing mess that are hard to organize teams around, which is going to concern me significantly more than it concerns any other player who's just going to run and claim shit. And yeah, that's about it, right?